Hello, good morning. It is your host, Emmanuel Isaiah Smith. Today's date is Sunday, September 7th, 2025. The time is 11:12 a.m. and I am in Homestead, Florida. The title of this lecture is Workplace Mobbing. I found it both necessary and critical to talk about workplace mobbing on account of how instrumental it is in a gang-stalking campaign against a targeted person. When I talk about gang-stalking, I talk about its many layers. Gang-stalking is a multifaceted, multi-layered political problem. It's a sociological problem. It's an economic problem. It is an ethical dilemma. One thing that it is not is it is not a necessary component of any civilization. Over the past 10,000 years, governments and empires across this world have crumbled to the ground because of programs, protocols, and implementations that were imposed upon the people with malice and irresponsibility from the rulers of those governments and kingdoms. The ironic thing about workplace mobbing is it is the very antithesis of what we might describe as the human trajectory through today's world. What is the human trajectory through today's world? You're born into this world. You're raised by your parents. At some point during your childhood years, you go to elementary school. Then you go to middle school, high school, and then from there, either college or the workforce. Why do people, when they reach a certain age, meet societal expectations of either going to school or entering the workforce? There's an old saying, I believe it came out of the Kingdom of England in medieval times. It says, idle hands are the devil's playground. That quote means that when a person is not occupied with something, a hobby, a career, an occupation, a daily obligation, that they become idle, just sort of sitting around twiddling their thumbs. The human imagination runs wild when you have nothing to do. It's important to stay busy with something productive, even if it's political commentary and graphic design, because human beings are by nature mischievous. A person has to learn at some point in their childhood that mischief is not the way to go. And the reason mischief is not the way to go is because it causes undue disruptions in the flow of things. It causes undue disruptions in interpersonal relationships. It causes disruption in communities. It causes disruption within the legal framework of a country. It causes disruption in the flow of society. Indeed, it causes disruption in a person's ability to work, to contribute, to earn a living, to contribute to the American economy with tax dollars. If a person has nothing to do ever, mischief abounds. Now, that's not to say that, of course, there are people who are more enterprising and industrious than others. Let's say we take away every piece of civilization that exists in the world today, and we go back to the Stone Ages right now, in the flick of in the snap of a finger. We all go back in time. We're in the Stone Age now. There's nothing on the earth but plants, animals, and people. No structures, no roads, no electricity, no transportation, no hospital, no schools, no places no corporate offices, no grocery stores. There's no sophisticated governments. There's no organized religion. There's just human beings, wild beasts, and vegetation. That's all that's on the earth. Let's say there are 100 people left on the earth in these conditions. Let's say they split into two factions. 50 of these last remaining people travel east, and 50 of these last remaining people travel west. Let's say the 50 people traveling west are idle. They determine that their whole purpose on this earth is to do mischief and see if they can get away with it. The people who traveled east decided, we're going to try and be enterprising, not because it's particularly fun. Yeah, there's nothing on this earth but people and nature, but we will try to be resourceful. We will use what's around us. We will assume risks and dangers in order to discover how to become more civilized, and we will do our very best. So let's say in 100 years, the 50 people who traveled east, they've all passed away, but they have offspring that they've passed their values down to. And the people who traveled west, the same. They've all passed away, but they have progeny that they've passed their values down to. Let's say the progeny of the eastern people and the progeny of the western people meet somewhere in the center of the territory. No doubt will there be a war of wills. The people from the east are going to try to introduce their customs and ways to the people of the west, and the people of the west are going to try to impose their ideals on the people of the East. I can assure you, ladies and gentlemen, that the people who come from the East will eventually subdue and overcome the Western people. And the reason this is going to happen is preparation. One side is enterprising, the other side is mischievous. One side thinks ahead, the other side only considers what's going on right now at the present. One side has noble ideals, the other side is given into their ape-like nature. The Eastern people are going to win. And they are eventually going to absorb the Western people, and the Western people will be no more. I said earlier in this lecture that governments, kingdoms, and empires over the past 10,000 years have crumbled due to deleterious governmental policies. Gang-stalking is one such policy. Now, I'm going to say it like this. People that participate in this lousy signaling mechanism, which essentially is pure mischief, it's basically various citizens leaving their home each day with the expectation that they are going to run into a like-minded person who speaks the same communicative language that they do with respect to this community harassment mechanism. They're going to take signals, cues, verbal commands, vehicular maneuvers. Yes, vehicles do communicate signals to other vehicles and to pedestrians as to who the target is. It usually manifests as the vehicle darting in front of a target at close range, nearly missing him, or some other buffoonish maneuver such as that, to mark the target, to let everyone in the vicinity know this person, the one I just swerved in front of, the one I just nearly backed into, the one that I just nearly sideswiped with my rear view mirror, that's the target. That's the suspicious person. That's the one we're watching. If you must use your signals on anyone, if you must descend on someone, descend upon him. It is state-sanctioned mischief, and for any of the targeted persons who this program has claimed their life, and mind you, ladies and gentlemen, I'm assuming I'm not the only targeted individual in the country, but I am of a certain, it's to me of a certainty that if there are other targeted persons in this country, there's no doubt that a number of them have lost their life due to this program. There's absolutely no doubt in my mind whatsoever. Gang stalkers collide into targeted people. They obstruct the path of targeted people. They throw off the balance of targeted people. They constantly get in targeted people's way in places that could cause them harm. On a flight of stairs, while the person is walking on a slippery surface somewhere, possibly at a swimming pool or at the beach where there's a body of water around, where that person could be harmed if they lost their balance and fell into the water. Okay, gang stalkers, yes, signal people and participate in something I call synchronized obstruction of movement against people in various places, even when there is an opportunity for the targeted person to become harmed by the signal. And yes, when targeted persons get behind the wheel of a car, Your stalkers jump into action with their vehicles and immediately contain you as you're driving down the street or the highway, oftentimes participating in various deleterious, obstructive, dangerous, and reckless homicidal driving maneuvers. What is workplace mobbing, ladies and gentlemen? Take everything I just told you, condense it into a package, and throw it into the workplace. That is what a targeted person has to go through when they attempt to work. Now, here's how I know that gang-stalking, which is a federally funded program that was obviously implemented post 9/11 in national security packages, okay, being a reboot of COINTELPRO Operation Hoodwink. Go to FBI.gov for more on that program. This is how I know gang-stalking is a human experimentation program. This is how I know that it is a behavior modification program. This is how I know that it is a corrupt and disruptive intelligence program. It's because of workplace mobbing. If a person cannot work because their co-workers, either their immediate co-workers or others in the company that have found some code, signal, or indicator that you are a target to be trifled with, and that they have something to gain by trifling with you, it can be difficult to impossible to plant yourself and establish yourself in any workplace. Now, imagine going to work, your first day on the job, and your mindset might be, yeah, I experienced some synchronization in my personal life, but certainly I'll be able to get rid of the scourge if I apply myself to an occupation. At this point, I'm working. At this point, I'm paying taxes. At this point, I'm contributing to society. At this point, I can handle my obligations. At this point, I can do for my progeny. At this point, I can advance and prosper myself in this country. And I can be a productive citizen, one that assists in the American experiment rather than take or hinder. So you go to work, and the first day on the job, you're climbing the stairs to get to your office. Someone nearly knocks you down the stairs in a synchronous fashion because the knucklehead took a signal to disrupt you in some kind of way. Now, here's the discipline to gang stalking, ladies and gentlemen. These inbred thugs that participate in this garbage have no accountability. Gang stalking is essentially a federally sanctioned mischief and attack weapon that a person can use against another person with no recourse. And here's why there's no recourse or consequence. It's because the patterns, the signals, the maneuvers, the obstruction, the disruption, the crowding, the collisions, and yes, the attacks that a targeted person experiences at the hand of signaled gang stalkers are oftentimes and by design difficult to point out, difficult to report, and difficult to quantify. This cowardly aspect of the signaling mechanism is what gives gang stalkers the psychological security they need to keep pestering people. The goal is pester as many people as possible without recourse, and if someone does try to confront you about it, all you have to do is deny it. If someone confronts you at the workplace about it, you can deny it. You could even make a scene and try and make the person you're pestering look bad to their supervisors. There are actually a lot of supervisors in the American workplace that use this signaling mechanism to pester employees that are underneath them because they don't believe that the employees are going to have the audacity to report any such behavior to the Human Resources Department. Why? Well, I have some theories. One, work can be a cumbersome thing psychologically if you don't like what you do. Not everybody gets to work in a place where they consider it their dream job. Some people work wherever they can find a job just to pay the bills or just to keep a roof over their head. Some people work because there's some legal mandate hanging over their head to do so. Some people work just for something to do. They don't have to work, they just choose to. They have everything they need in the way of monetary considerations. They just work because they want to. They want to see what's going on in the world around them. Some people work to learn how a business works. Some people work to climb the corporate ladder. Some people work simply to pass the time and because they simply like the feeling of having a job. You cannot work, pay taxes, contribute to American society if when you go to work you are mobbed by the very people who you're supposed to be working alongside of to further the interest of the company that you work for. Now, workplace mobbing does a lot of things to a person. Clearing my throat, ladies and gentlemen. Ultimately, you are not going to be able to retire anywhere and collect a pension if every time you go to work you experience some sort of organized disruption from your coworkers, not because you've done anything wrong, but because your coworkers see you as easy prey to further their own careers. If you come into a workplace, some companies refer to colleagues and coworkers as teammates. These aren't your coworkers, these are your teammates. You're to come together as a team and you're supposed to further the interest of your own careers. You're going to help each other and we're going to move this company forward. To people who produce, of course there are advancement opportunities. Of course there are opportunities for raises. So we'll stop there. Even though these people are being called a team, they're still competitors. There was a There was a television show back in the early 2000s that was very popular. That show was called Survivor. And in this show, a group of strangers who don't know each other prior to the show would meet on a tropical island somewhere, courtesy of NBC, I believe was the television company that hosted this show, that produced the show. And all of these people on this island had different personalities, different backgrounds, different strengths and weaknesses, different physical traits. And from week to week, a vote was held among the participants of this show to vote one of the people off. And apparently, if I remember correctly, it's been a long time since I've watched the show, but I believe the last person standing gets a grand prize of some kind, right? When it gets down to the last two people, there's some sort of a showdown, and the winner of that showdown gets a grand prize. So, all of these people meet, right? They're all on this game show. They all want to win that grand prize, but they also know that there is some level of cohesion and teamwork that they have to utilize in order to give themselves a better opportunity to win that grand prize. Okay? No one wants to be the person who everybody dislikes, because that person is the one that gets voted off the island immediately. So there has to be some sort of compromise between the participants of the island in order to reach that grand prize. Now, from time to time, you'd see various participants of this show collude, conspire. If we all band together, maybe on the next episode, we can vote him off the island because we don't think he mixes in with us well, or we don't think he's good for the program, or we think he's a detriment to our enjoyment of what we're here for, or he's a detriment to the productivity of why we're here. So from time to time, you would get contestants on this show conspiring to vote off so-and-so. And as the show gets closer to the end, some of the people who were conspiring earlier in the show begin conspiring against each other. And if I'm not mistaken, there were a few side stories, like, for example, a number of the contestants going into relationships or something like that. I mean, it's hard to know if that was real or if that was essentially something that the producers had them do to make the show more interesting. But by and large, Survivor was considered a reality show, which means that it was largely unscripted, and much of what happened was candid. But I digress. Ultimately, that show progressed into a situation where it became obvious towards the end of the season who the probable winners of this grand prize were going to be. And at that point, you started seeing people's real nature and their real personalities and their real ability to either band together or not, look after their own interest or look after the interests of the team. Imagine the American workforce as a corporate manifestation of Survivor. You have a lot of people working together or working in a similar capacity with similar duties and with similar responsibilities and similar opportunities, similar salaries and benefits, depending on the level of responsibility that you have in your company. And yes, there are group projects that people have to work on, but even in those group projects, there's competition. No one wants to get passed up for that promotion or that pay raise or the upgrade in status to the next person. People are naturally competitive. Now, when you get into the workforce as a targeted person, the game is no longer competition. The game is life or death. You, as a targeted person, are fighting for your job. You're not fighting for the promotion. You're not fighting for the pay raise. You're not fighting for the ability to climb the corporate ladder. You're fighting for your very job the second you walk in. Gang stalkers take pride in disrupting another person's life with their signaling. If a gang stalker participates in synchronization, signaling, workplace mobbing, synchronized space crowding, vehicular obstruction of movement, sabotage, computer hacking, interpersonal relationship sabotage, false narrative bringing, libel, slander, and character defamation, all the things that gang stalkers do routinely and systematically, and you don't actually get to harm another person with that, you feel fake. You don't feel like a real gang stalker. If you use all that crap on people, you use every thuggish thing you have, and you still can't get no one fired, you can't get them incarcerated, you can't get them beat up, you can't get them sick, you can't get them killed, you can't harm their relationships, you can't make them mad, you can't make them angry, you can't make them depressed, you can't. It's like, what's the point of being a gang stalker if you can't destroy somebody? This is boring. I want to use my gang stalking techniques on somebody I can actually harm. That'll make me feel like the real thing. And then I can create a narrative around myself at work. You don't cross me, because if you cross me, something bad will happen to you. Yeah, me and my buddies around here that practice signaling, we'll find a way to disrupt you right out of this company. And some of you, we're going to disrupt out of this company just to do it. Come on, you useful idiots. You stalkers, you signalers, you disruptors, you unwelcome persons, you annoying people who just won't go the hell away. This is how you fake. And you have federal backing to do this crap because apparently there is some national security auxiliary out there that thinks that certain people in this country, certain segments of the population, should be able to disrupt and or harm other people or segments of the population with no recourse because segment A contributes more to society than segment B. So we're going to feed segment B to segment A the way you feed a hungry wolf a rabbit. We are going to take these targeted people and we are going to offer them as prey to our gang stalkers. Because we're a national security apparatus, our job is not only to keep the country safe, our goal is to use your tax dollars to make sure that certain people in this country are able to succeed and other segments of the population are constantly attacked and ritually disrupted. Yeah, you got the job. They hired you. They signed you up. They offered you a salary. You're a part of the company now. But you know what? We want to eat your lunch because it'll make us look better. It'll be fun running you out of the company. And us hardworking people, we like fun because it makes our lives easier considering the workload that we take on every day. We need to have some fun with somebody. We need to draw someone's blood. We need to disrupt. We need to destroy. We need to uproot. We need to do all of these things because it keeps us sane amidst our daily workload. You know, there was once a wife-beating epidemic in the United States. Guys were coming home from work, stressed out. They just had a long day. And you know what? The next day is going to be equally long and tiresome. And as a matter of fact, they have to work. Because if they don't work, if they're not able to produce for themselves, if they're not able to produce for their families, if they're not able to secure a standard of living, then life gets a lot worse. Some call it the curse of man. You have to work. Some attribute it to the biblical story, Adam and Eve. God cursed the ground and said, Adam, from now on, in order for you to exist on this earth, you must till the ground for your living. That's called the Adamic curse. Some don't consider work a curse. Some consider it a blessing. I always liked it. When the synchronization and the community harassment set in, that's when I started getting irritated. But I digress. Why did men used to come home and beat their wife and kids in this country? And there was an epidemic of that, particularly from the 1940s to the 1960s. Sort of that 20-year period. You had women going everywhere with black eyes, and you had wives and mothers going to the grocery store and their arm would be in a sling, and you'd have 5, 10, 25 women in your local church congregation with teeth knocked out, and you had guys going to Sunday school and their Sunday school teachers' knuckles would be all busted up, and you'd say, hey, what happened to your hand there, Pastor? Oh, nothing. I was just mowing the lawn the other day, and I hit a stick or something and it flew up and hit me in the hand. And then you go and see the pastor's wife. She has a busted orbital bone. She's sitting there reading the Gospel of John with one eye closed. Okay, you take your kids to the local park so they can play some frisbee. And you got women pushing baby strollers and they're limping because their husband then broke one of their kneecaps for making a bad pot roast. Stuff like that used to happen a lot in the United States. There was a wife-beating epidemic in this country. Now, when domestic violence laws started getting tougher, and the stigma of being a wife-beating man grew more and more treacherous, you started seeing less of these instances of men beating their women up. I mean, It even got to the point where at some point in the trajectory in the last 20 years, there were a lot of women that began falsely accusing their men of beating them up. It was almost like the women were saying, shoot, take us back to the old days so we can get some sympathy. Because an abused woman used to get a lot of sympathy in this country. And if a woman falsely claims to have been domestically abused, she can attain some of that same sympathy from family and friends and so forth. So, notice how there was no gang stalking back then to stop these American men from beating their women within an inch of their life. There was no synchronization back then to protect those women, and some of these guys killed their wives out of anger. There were a ton of people in across various socioeconomic groups that used to beat the mess out of their wives and their kids from stress that was produced during their work day. You had women and children terrified of the man that was supposed to be their father and husband. Where was the national security apparatus when that was going on? That was a national emergency right there. And quite frankly, in the 40s, 50s, and 60s, there were no CCTV cameras. There were no cell phones. There was no internet connections. These battered women were not able to go online and email somebody and say, hey, my husband's whooping me again. Can you send somebody, or can you get me some help, or can you get me out of here? Some of them probably wanted to call the police but couldn't because they were afraid for their life. Where was the federal government? You all didn't step in and do anything for those women. You were just like, she doesn't like her husband slapping her around, then maybe she should just get the kids and leave one night. Wait till he goes to work, pack up your stuff, hop on a bus, and go see grandma. So, there was no national emergency called. During this horrible period in American history. And there was no particular or special protocol in place to protect these women that were being systematically beaten, sometimes horribly, sometimes with belts and extension cords, sometimes while pregnant, by their husbands. Because their husbands came home stressed from work and they needed somebody to take out their stress on. So they had a bottle of whiskey, they'd take a few sips of that, or if they had a 6-pack of beer, they'd take a few sips of that. If that didn't take the stress off, they'd find a reason to get upset at their wife or kids and beat the mess out of them. And a lot of times those women and those children had psychological problems for the rest of their life because of abusive husbands and fathers. Where were you tough guy gang stalkers back then? Did any of you step in on behalf of the battered women and children? No? Where was the federal national security apparatus? Yeah, there was national security back then. It just didn't have the same title that it does now, but there were national security protocols back then. Clandestine operations. How come there were no clandestine operations in this country to stop these women from getting beaten within an inch of their lives by drunkard, abusive husbands? What about the kids getting beaten within an inch of their lives by drunkard, abusive fathers? And this is across the socioeconomic spectrum, ladies and gentlemen. Across the demographic spectrum. There was a pandemic of this. Now, what they do is they offer like-minded idiots to those abusive husbands and fathers an outlet. They're like, let's not go back to the 1940s. This is the American intelligence system here. This is the American intelligence system, y'all. This is the national security intelligence apparatus at work right here. This is the useful idiot module right here. Let's not go back to the days where guys who worked every day and needed an outlet to relieve their stress on. Let's not go back to the days where they beat their wife and kids to a pulp. It looks bad. We're progressing as a democracy. This is a new America. Rather than let these drunkard husbands and fathers go home and beat their wife and kids, we're going to give them a different outlet to relieve stress at work and outside of work. We're going to give them some signaling. And we're going to teach them how to pester people in such a way where it's difficult for them to report it. That way you can relieve your stress, you can do annoying and pestering things to people you don't like, and you can get rid of stress all within the acceptance and perpetration of workplace mobbing. As a matter of fact, you don't even have to go home stressed anymore, fellas. All you husbands and fathers out there, you tax-paying citizens, you voters, you homeowners, you car owners, you responsible men, you that keep this country running strong, don't whoop your wife's butt no more. Don't kick your kids down the flight of stairs no more. We'll give you something better. We will give you an ultimate way of relieving stress. You can take out your problems on your coworkers instead and get rid of that stress. Rather than take it out on your family, take it out on your coworker, particularly that one that sits over there in the eastern wing, the one you don't like, the one that thinks the Seattle Seahawks are better than the Chicago Bears. You know the one. Yeah, him. We can find a way to set it up to where you can pester him not only at work, but you can find a way to signal others to pester him outside of work. He's not going to be able to report it because he'll never see it coming. And it'll be in such a way that it'll be hard to say it was an attack or career sabotage. But we can help you take out your stress on him. That way you'll be a more productive worker, you'll be able to get rid of stress, and you won't be sending your wife and kids to the hospital every month. You had guys saying, you know what, that sounds like a pretty good bargain. I think I'll take it. And thus workplace mobbing was born, ladies and gentlemen. And that's really all it is. It's a way for people to take out the stresses of work, the stresses of life on people around them who are deemed less worthy to progress than they are. Sometimes groups of coworkers get together in unison, like some sort of a whacked out sports team, and they get together in the huddle and they draw up plays. How are we going to get rid of this person? How are we going to sabotage this person's career? Jimmy, you do this. Susan, you do this. Tommy, you do this. Jeff, you do this. Gregory, you do this. Phil, you do that. And I'll do this. And we'll do it on a daily basis so we can get rid of this person. It'll make us all feel like the real thing. Plus, we'll have one less person to compete with for that promotion coming up. Remember the Survivor reference, ladies and gentlemen. People conspiring to get rid of others so that there's less competition in the workforce. Workplace mobbing is not a necessary evil. One thing you hear a lot with respect to governmental matters, particularly over the last, we'll say 30 years, because over the last 30 years we've seen sort of I'd say probably to a lesser degree in the previous 5 years, but from about 1990 to the present day, we'll say the past 35 years, we've saw a surge in terrorism actions around the world, but we also saw a surge in domestic terrorism here in the United States. There were all kinds of sub-military factions and guerrilla units that studied guerrilla warfare and militia type of groups that organized themselves to do domestic terrorism right here in the United States. And if you look at statistics concerning domestic terrorists that were caught, prosecuted, or killed by the United States federal establishment from 1990 to 2025, the number is higher than you think. You'd be surprised. It doesn't always make the news, but there were a lot of those that organized themselves in the United States during this time period. And did catastrophic things to people. Where were you gang stalkers then? Are you keeping the country safe? How come you weren't able to intercept Timothy McVeigh? Isn't this a national security protocol, or are you just looking for easy targets to pester? As a human experimentation mechanism, why weren't you guys able to stop Timothy McVeigh from blowing up the Oklahoma City Federal Building in 1995? Where were you stalkers at then? Where were your signals and your disruptions when that man made a 50 megaton bomb in a hotel room, went and rented a U-Haul truck, drove the U-Haul truck back to the hotel room, went and got a friend of his to pick the bomb up and put it in the back of the U-Haul truck, closed the back of it, drove to a federal building in downtown Oklahoma, backed the truck into the parking garage, got out of the truck, walked across the street and hopped in a vehicle and took off down the interstate and detonated the bomb, blowing the entire thing up, killing 168 people, some of which were children. Where were you federal liaisons back then? How come you and none of your street stalkers were able to find him or sabotage him? It's because you guys aren't looking for that kind of stuff. You want easy targets. You want guys like Emmanuel Isaiah Smith. You guys want people like me who have never built a bomb, who have never taken any sort of paramilitary course or had any sort of experience with military operations. You want guys like me, guys who are going to school, trying to study political science somewhere, and you walk up, hey, he's trying to get a bachelor's degree. Can you believe that? That son of a gun's trying to get a bachelor's degree. We're gonna have to disrupt him. And then you got federal liaisons on campus organizing synchronization in my classrooms and around around the university where I am, using your domination tactics, your annoyance tactics, your disruption tactics, your vandalism and burglary tactics, your sabotage mechanisms on somebody trying to get a degree, but you can't do anything about somebody looking to blow up a federal building, someone named Timothy McVeigh, someone who had a history of saying and doing outrageous things. Wow. Now, where were you stalkers at when Adam Lanza grabbed an AK-47 and went to Sandy Hook Elementary School and massacred 27 8-year-olds? How come he wasn't disrupted? Surely he had red flags. Where were you guys at then? Nowhere. You were at home with a box of peppermint patties. You were sitting on your couch, probably counting the number of roaches that crawled across your carpet. And that's what you were doing that day. Where were you when Nicholas Cruz went into Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School and killed 17 people and injured 17 others? Where were your disruption tactics then? Where was your sabotage? You were in your living rooms. I'm talking to you stalkers. I'm talking to you liaisons. I'm talking to you useful idiots. You were in your living rooms. You were eating peppermint patties and counting the number of roaches that crawled across your floor. That's where you were. Where were you when Ethan Crumley over in Oxford, Michigan pulled a pistol out of his parents' safe, went to his high school and blew 4 kids' heads off with it? Where were your disruption tactics? Where was your surveillance? It was nowhere. It was with you in your living room, eating peppermint patties, watching roaches crawl across your floor. That's where you were. What about Columbine, when those 2 maniacs grabbed automatic weapons and so forth and went to their Columbine High School and killed all those people? Where were your disruption tactics then? That's right, I'm talking right to you. And I know a lot of you are listening right now using some kind of a sound boom equipment. And rather than listening to my rhetoric, you're listening to my tone of voice and certain keywords I'm saying, and you're nitpicking out of this lecture threats or stuff that makes you feel uncomfortable, so you can send more of those monkeys that you have, those useful idiots, my way to pester me. Go home. Sit on your couch. I'm talking to you liaisons. I'm talking to you useful idiot stalkers. Go home, sit on your couch, eat some peppermint patties, and watch the roaches crawl back and forth in front of you on your carpet, because you ain't doing nothing useful out here. Pestering sovereign citizens, trampling on their civil rights, trampling on their civil liberties, trampling on their constitutional rights. Go home. Grab some peppermint patties, sit on your couch, eat as many of them as you possibly can. Stuff your face with them. And watch the roaches crawl back and forth in front of you, because you, in my mind, are useless, pestering stalkers. Thank you for listening, ladies and gentlemen. This is Workplace Mobbing.